Let me tell you, you're gonna get calls for background all the time. Click that yes button and get yourself on set.
1, 2, 3, let's switch this up.
Hello, my little honeys. Welcome back to my channel. If you are new, my name is Anastasia, also known as your fave social media girl. I'm a Canadian actor based here in Toronto. I make videos about acting, self-love, body positivity, and occasional vlogs. If you haven't done so already, please don't forget to subscribe. And of course, don't forget to turn on the bell notification button so you know every single time that I post, which is on We're gonna have a little bit of a fun video today because these are things that I want to talk about because they're important. It's a background acting video and I haven't done one actually I think in a couple of months. And I thought, hey, you know what? Let's talk about background acting because there are things that have changed around in the background acting world since COVID. And I think it's important to know because these are things I feel like are important to know because it's just going to make your life a lot easier when it comes to background acting and sort of figuring all that stuff out. And background acting was one way before COVID, then during COVID, it was a whole other thing. And now I feel like it's a little bit of mix of both. There are things that I feel like COVID switched around in the background world that kind of they want to keep because it really helps. But then there are things that I feel like just doesn't really work and it gives a lot more work and time and money. So they kind of want to switch it back to the way it was before COVID. So I'm going to talk about those things that I've noticed on the background acting world and what's changing and what's staying. Let's get started, honeys. So in general, there is a lot less restrictions going on. And I'm talking about the vaccine, I'm talking about the COVID test, I'm talking about the masks. A lot of the restrictions have been lifted. People can be closer to you. Masks are still mandatory, but you don't have to double mask and you don't have to put the face shield. I believe now you can even do your own mask. You don't have to do the blue medical mask that they give you. That's what they did before. Big thing that has been switched around is vaccine policy. So there are still shows that ask for triple vax, there are shows that still ask for double vax, and there are now shows that do not have a vaccine policy at all whatsoever. So if you're not vaccinated, you are totally able to go to the non-vaccinated show, and they will say that when they call you for background, they will say what the show requires, and you have to prove your vaccination. So this isn't something you could just say yes and get on and no problem. I do not recommend for you to lie about that kind of stuff because they do check, and if they find out that you lied about it, you most likely well, you're just gonna get a bad rep and it's just not a good idea. Just don't do it. But that's the good part is that it's now open for everybody and it makes it a lot easier. I talked about masks. What else? Oh my God. COVID test. This is a really important one about COVID tests. So before, for COVID tests, you'd either get paid $50 for a COVID test or $100. It depends on the production and their budget. If you did COVID tests that was not on the day of you on set, those are when you get paid $100 or $50 for the COVID test. Now, they're doing a little bit differently. They don't need to do COVID tests as much as they did before. With that being said, most of the time it's testing day of. So you come to set, you get tested, and you go straight to set. You do not get paid the $100 for that COVID test because you're already on set. The only time you get paid the $100 or the $50 is when you're doing a COVID test that is not on the day that you're working off set. The other thing is COVID tests now are rapid tests. They used to do the full-blown PCR test. They also did a half test and then they did rapid tests. Again, it all depends on production and what the production wanted. I haven't seen or heard of a PCR test being done in a while, in like a couple of months. So I don't know if maybe some productions are still doing it, but if they are, it's very, very unlikely that they are. It's like probably 5% of them that they are still doing it. So now it's rapid test. So if you do have a fear of testing, like me, that PCR test killed me. In all of COVID, I don't even know how many times I did that PCR test. So my nose is like, I don't have a nose anymore, but rapid test is something that I really do love and prefer. So if that's an issue for you, no worries. Most of the time, they are now, like 95% of the time, they are doing a rapid test. Background right now has gotten a lot more busier. It was already busy to begin with COVID, but as soon as COVID, the restrictions, especially in Toronto, Canada, have been getting lifted, all the shows are back at it for a couple of reasons. So vaccinations is not mandatory. A lot of shows are able to do no vaccine policy. Before, because in Toronto it was required to everyone be vaccinated, a lot of shows were not able to do their productions. And not only that, a lot of background actors who were not vaccinated were unfortunately not allowed to be a part of the show because they were not vaccinated. So things are a lot more busier. I get a call, I'd say 1 to 2 times a week, which before was not the case. I would get maybe once every 2 weeks, once a month. So right now it's a lot more frequent. I think a lot of shows also were not filming during COVID because people were getting sick and everything, and then with the restrictions, I think now a lot of shows are trying to fast track and get their production going and done before the year ends. And some of them will be even going into the next new year. So if you're looking to get started to background now, you're at a prime time. Everything's filming right now. I get calls 24/7, and I think even continuation into the new year, starting February, they're gonna continue trying to finish the season or finish the film or whatever. So I think it's gonna continue being a very, very busy season. The other thing is a lot of more things are filmed here in Toronto specifically. Our market here has significantly opened up, and because of that, there's a lot more opportunity for background actors to be working. So don't worry if you can't do background now, because next year, let me tell you, you're gonna get calls for background all the time. They are doing a lot of the calls now are coming in the day of. Before they were a lot more in advance, and they had to be in advance because there was a certain amount of people that can be on set. There was also a certain amount of COVID tests you had to do depending on the set. If it was a big Hollywood film, for example, I did background acting for Nightmare Alley, the movie with Cate Blanchett and Bradley Cooper. I literally got paid to sit for 5 days in quarantine because it was a big Hollywood film and I would be very close to Bradley Cooper and everything. So they paid me full 8-hour pays for 5 days. So I knew 2 weeks in advance about this job that I was coming on. Nowadays, I sometimes get a call the day of being like, can you go into testing today and work tomorrow? Or can you go and work today and they're going to test you the day of? So it's a little bit harder now to say yes because I'm back into my serving world, and with auditions, it's not as easy sometimes for me to juggle also the background acting in there as well. If I was giving more time, then it'd be a different story, but it's hard when you all kind of have a full-time job going on, so it's not easy. I liked it when it was 2 weeks in advance because then I can book it off work, plan it, all that kind of stuff. So keep that in mind if you do have a full-time job. It's a little bit harder to get on the set now because they're calling you day off, but hey, I mean, if you have the day off and you want to work, by all means, click that yes button and get yourself on set. The other thing I noticed is that the days are much longer, which means that's higher pay because it's the double time, it's the overtime, it's all the penalties that they have to pay for, and you're on set for much longer, so that's great. Because of the restrictions, I think they just couldn't be that long on set. The other thing is that you couldn't have that many people in the room, and in terms of with the masking and everything, it was just a lot to be on set for almost 16 hours. So do be prepared that if you're going on set now, have that in the back of your mind that you might be on there for 16 hours, and that's where the snacks, the things to do, bring all of that. You're gonna need it because 16 hours on set and you're staring into the wall is really tough. It's not easy. And I mean, who knows? You might actually be on actual set for 16 hours. I've had times where I was literally sitting for 10 hours not being used, and then the last 3 hours of set I was used. So for those 10 hours, I did my editing, I did my Instagram planning, I learned my audition, I did everything because I bring everything with me. So remember to bring your entire life with you when you are booked on set. The other thing that's really interesting and that's really important is that before, during COVID, you were not able to do multiple shows at a time because of the spreading and everything. It got a little bit too messy, and if you were on a show that shut down because of COVID, now that if you're booked for another show around the same time, they have to now replace you, or if you were already on that show, then that show has to shut down. So they really try to avoid having you booked into 6 shows in 1 month for the sake of COVID. Now that's not really the case because restrictions are really kind of off, and with everything going on, you can do multiple shows at a time, which is great. The other awesome part is that if you do get sick with COVID, they're pretty easy with it now. The entire production does not shut down. They just get you to go home and then you get better. And if you don't have any symptoms, you just go and get retested, because now we don't have a quarantine period at all. You don't have to sit 5 days once you get tested positive for COVID. So sometimes these tests can be faulty. So usually what they'll do is they get you to check again. If you still test positive, then they'll just be like, okay, you know what, like hang out, and then if the show's still filming and we need you, we'll get you to come back. If you do the test again and it comes back negative, then that means that original test was a faulty one. You don't have to worry about it. So that's the good part. So then you can kind of go back and do your thing on set. So they don't shut it down. I think it depends on who you were with. If you were around people, they'll probably just retest those people to make sure that they're okay. And if everyone's testing negative, they'll just continue with the production. The reason why they're not shutting down is because to shut down a production, it is so much money to do that. And I'm telling you, the amount of money that they've already put into the whole COVID world, into masks, hand sanitizer, like shields, paying people so much extra time, the amount of COVID testing that they had to put into it to pay everybody to do the COVID testing, and then pay the nurses, pay the testing, everything. Like the amount of money that production companies put in during COVID for this, they can't shut it down, okay? They just can't do it, because the amount of things that are filming right now in Toronto, these are things that probably should have been already done like a year ago, and they're just trying to catch up now. So they just don't have the time to be shutting it down completely, and it's a huge loss of money for them. So they just can't afford doing that as well. So if you get tested positive, don't freak out that you're now going to be shutting down the entire production. It is very unlikely that will happen. I think the only way they would have to, like, not shut it down, but stop production is if the lead actor tests positive for COVID. From what I understand, what they're going to try to do is they'll try to film other scenes where that actor isn't used, so they can continue still doing something. And then whenever that actor gets better, they'll kind of bring that actor back and film the scenes where the actor was missed, is what they'll try to do. Honeys, those are the things that I have noticed happening in the background world, some things that are changing and whatnot. It's important to know these things because I have run into some of the issues myself where I didn't know that, vaccine policies is not really needed anymore. The fact that COVID testing is now happening day of, and the fact that now you're being called pretty much the day before the day of to work. And that's something that definitely people need to work with and work around. So these are important things to take note of. Now, I don't know if this is how they're going to run moving forward. I think it all just depends on how COVID goes, and if it's like done, if I could say that, then they'll probably continue the way it is. And I think slowly they'll try to bring it back the way it was before. I also hear, like, this is not related to background, but even in terms of principal acting, commercial acting, so commercial casting is what they're doing now, is that they're actually going back to in-person audition for commercials. In terms of feature films and TV shows, they're still doing self-tape and Zoom auditions, but a lot of commercials, I'd say 60% of commercials that I would get a booking for, they are looking to do either a self-tape and then the second audition is in person, or they'll go straight for you coming in person and doing the first round auditions from there. So it's hard to say. I think some parts of the acting world is moving back into the way it was before, and I think some parts are going to stay the same because it just works better for them. So it's going to be a little bit of a mix. Anyways, honey, let me know in the comments below, what are some things that you noticed about the background acting world that I have not mentioned? I'd love to hear them and to have a chat about it. I think it's important that we create a community, we help each other out when it comes to this kind of stuff, because we all want to be on the same page. Don't forget to subscribe. I love you, honeys, and have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you all next Friday. Mwah. Bye, honeys.